Andrew Tate, David Goggins, Gary Vee and his hustle culture. Do you ever feel like you're not doing enough? Well, in their own ways, each of these three men operate from their masculine warrior archetype. And that's what we're talking about today. If you've ever heard the term toxic masculinity, then you need to watch this video. In many ways, the warrior archetype is where toxic masculinity can manifest. But the warrior archetype is also where men and women can step into their masculine energy and take on the role of loyal, brave, protector with honor. I'm Jay, and over the last 4 years, I've been on my healing journey, and I've used therapy, I've used journaling, meditation, healing retreats, and plant medicine journeys to really go into my darkness, and I'm still in the process of doing that. I'm also in training to become a coach, and the course I'm doing uses the ideas of Carl Jung, Eastern spirituality, and modern neuroscience. And once I've completed that course, I hope to be able to support people using the knowledge from the course and my own 4 years of raw material on the subject to help people like yourself live your best life. Today, we have a full guide on the warrior archetype and how to unleash your inner warrior. We'll be talking about what the warrior archetype is, its strengths and weaknesses, how the warrior archetype has been present throughout history and different civilizations, and then finally how you can move through your warrior archetype. We'll be talking about the shadow and moving and maturing through that process. What is the warrior archetype? The warrior archetype is a universal pattern of behaviors that has been observed throughout history. It's associated with courage, with strength, and the ability to defend oneself and others. Another way of viewing the warrior archetype is that of action taker. So the warrior is the one who gets you out of bed in the morning, jumps into life, looks for the challenges, doesn't shy away from them, and the one who really moves you forward with purpose in life. The energy of the warrior archetype ranges on a scale from action taker to assertiveness to aggression, and then moving on to rage. And rage is if we're operating in the shadow of the warrior archetype. As a child, we embody the warrior archetype particularly at 2 stages. And these 2 stages are where we really want to make an impact on the world. So we have the terrible twos when we're a toddler, and we have those teenage rebellious years. And both of those stages are about asserting our identity onto the world using the warrior archetype. However, if that energy of the warrior archetype is squashed in our formative years and our childhood years, then the impact can be quite devastating and long lasting. And we'll go into what it means to live in the shadow of the warrior archetype later in the video. Moving on to the strengths of the warrior archetype now. And in many ways, the archetype is strength personified. So they will use their physical strength and their prowess to be one of society's protectors. The warrior archetype will stand up for themselves. They will stand up for those weaker than themselves. And they will also stand up and fight for the rights and the ideas and the causes they believe in. And so whether they're fighting for themselves, whether they're fighting for others, or whether they're fighting for their ideas and their values, the warrior archetype is willing to fight to the death if necessary. Indeed, the warrior archetype can actually need these battles to feel a sense of fulfillment and a sense of really existing in the world. So yeah, they're always looking out for that cause or that person or that thing inside them that they can fight for. The warrior's dedication to these fights and these battles can mean that they're always in a constant state of training their body, training their mind, training their emotions, so that they're always ready, always prepared. Whatever happens, you can count on the warrior to step up. And they're great that they're able to train their minds because they're able to keep calm, composed, whatever the situation, and never panic. That's why the warrior archetype is really suited for professions like the police, the fire service, being doctors, coast guards, things like that, where you've really got to think on your feet, be prepared for any situation, any scenario, and dive into action. Moving on to the weaknesses of the warrior archetype now. In their book, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette talk about some of the weaknesses of the warrior archetype. So we have that they can be brutal. The warrior archetype can be excessively aggressive and violent, and this can cause harm to themselves. It can cause harm to others, and the violence can be physical, but it also can be emotional and psychological. The warrior archetype can focus on being super macho. You can tell I'm not very macho. And with this macho culture, they can focus on strength and power, and that can sometimes be at the expense of, showing empathy, being sensitive to the needs of others, and showing emotional intelligence. They can also be addicted to adrenaline, so they can put themselves in situations where their safety or the safety of others is a secondary thought, and they just dive into situations because they want that hit of adrenaline. And then finally, we have intolerance. Those rooted in the warrior archetype can become fixed to their beliefs, their values, and they can become very narrow-minded. And anything else that doesn't fit their worldview is thrown out, rejected, and that can lead to them being very intolerant of others. So now let's look at where the warrior archetype has existed throughout different civilizations. And we see in societies where warfare was common, we see the warrior is celebrated as, someone who's noble, someone who has a shit ton of honor. We see them admired for their bravery, their skill, and the dedication they demonstrate to their cause. In medieval Europe, for example, knights were considered the epitome of nobility. Their code of chivalry emphasized values such as honor, loyalty, and courage. And knights were expected to protect the weak, defend their kingdom, and their valor in battle was highly, highly esteemed. Moving to the other side of the world, in Japan, we're all aware of the samurais. And in Japanese culture, the samurais represented honor, loyalty, and self-discipline. And the samurais also operated under a strict code of conduct called Bushido. And Bushido emphasized three things. It emphasized martial prowess, loyalty to one's lord, and self-control. In Native American cultures, we see that the warriors were highly respected for their bravery and courage also. Among the Plains Native Americans, warriors were often the most honored members of the tribe, and they were respected and celebrated through songs and dance. And then even in popular culture, we see with movies like Braveheart and Gladiator that we celebrate today warriors. We celebrated William Wallace and Maximus, and they also showed those central themes of the warrior in nobility, in sacrifice, in bravery, courage, fighting for a bigger cause, loyalty. We see all those themes in William Wallace and Maximus, and I for one really love those films. I know what you're asking. How can you tell if the warrior is existing in you? Let's dive into that now. So we'll go through the different stages from the shadow of the warrior to the call to action to listen to our warrior, to level 1, 2, and 3. And with each level, we get more mature and more wholesome with the warrior archetype. If we're in the shadow of the warrior archetype, we get into ruthless and unprincipled fights where we just want to win. We use our power solely for conquest. We can be a bully. We view anything different from us as a threat. So we're very intolerant of others, and other opinions. But then something might call us to have some introspection and think about how we're behaving. This could be another bully. They could beat us. They could beat us physically, emotionally, or psychologically. Perhaps there's a relationship breakdown. We realize that we pushed people away with our behavior, or we simply realize over time that our behavior doesn't make us feel good. And so we go into that. We start to mature and let go of the shadow. So we reach level 1. However, much like the shadow, we are still fighting for ourselves, but we may begin fighting for others too, although much of our aggression, be it physical, psychological, or emotional, is still unprincipled. But we keep going. We keep going to level 2, where we become more altruistic in our fighting. We begin to fight for something principled, something worthwhile, something bigger than us. And we begin to abide by the rules of a fair fight. So while winning is important, what's also important is how we win. We want to win fairly. And at level 3, we become the William Wallace and the Maximus of the modern age, but without the violence. We fight for what's right using other methods. We look for win-win situations. So we don't want to just destroy and conquer. We want everyone to be uplifted. We may start to communicate more honestly and more vulnerably. And in many ways, when we reach full maturity in the warrior, what we do is move closer to the feminine archetype of the caregiver. So we show empathy and we show love, and the fight is much more about moving everyone forward, including ourselves, but doing it in a kind and compassionate way. Thank you for watching the full guide on how to unleash your inner warrior. We spoke about what the warrior archetype is. We looked at its strengths and its weaknesses. We looked at how the warrior archetype has shown up across history and different civilizations. And then finally, we spoke about how you can mature through the different levels of the warrior archetype. I know what you're asking now. You're asking, how can you understand your inner warrior better? Well, the number one thing I think we can do is check how compassionate our inner warrior is. If our inner warrior is in its shadow, it can be unnecessarily aggressive towards others, but it can also direct that aggression inwards towards ourselves. So get out your journal, and I'd love you to journal on these questions. First up, how loving have we been to ourselves over the last month or so? How have we been speaking to ourselves? Do we use kind and encouraging language when we're speaking to ourselves? Or is much of our language harsh and aggressive? And the reason I'd like you to think about those questions is that if we want to be the epitome of the warrior and embody our inner Maximus or our inner William Wallace, we need to rule with kindness and compassion. And where that starts is in our inner kingdom. We need to rule our inner kingdom with love, with honor, with kindness and compassion. And that can sometimes start with how we speak to ourselves. So give it a try and let me know how you get on. And so all that's left for me to do is say thank you for watching and stay young. Stay young, everyone.